Welcome to the Business of Race podcast, where we examine issues of race and racism, how they impact businesses, and what employers can do to effectively address those issues to create a better working environment for everyone. I'm your host, Regina Newkirk-Rucci, the Director of Equity for 90 Forward. And today, I am joined in the conference room by Dr. Rochelle Price, who is a leadership expert as well as a knower of all things. So we are very excited to have you in the conference room today, Rochelle.
Thank you.
All right. And so just also disclaimer that, you know, we're in Leadership Jacksonville together. We are in the legendary class of 2024,
legendary.
Right?
Yes.
So just want to give a little quick shout out there. But just before we get into the topics, just, you know, to do a little bit of chit chat. Truthfully, I'm always thinking about vacations. I'm not going to lie. I love to travel.
Me too.
I always want to be somewhere else. So if you think about vacations, where's some place or some places that would be on your list of places to go?
Well, we ended up taking my daughter to Costa Rica for her graduation because it was during COVID, and they had just opened up. She was supposed to go to Europe. Well, we were supposed to go to Europe, and Europe was not really an option at the time.
Right.
And it was absolutely lovely. It was wonderful.
I've heard great things about Costa Rica.
People were wonderful. I'm originally from West Virginia, so it's about the size of West Virginia. And it has mountains like West Virginia, but it's rainforest. So if you like animals, which I love animals, and it has ocean, so it's surrounded by ocean. And you can hike, there's so many outdoorsy things that you can do the whole time. So you can kayak, you can surf, you can ride horses around volcanoes.
Wow.
And it was super fun. And the people there are just the most loving, generous. We ate beans and rice and they eat at every meal, and we love beans and rice. So we were just so happy to be there. It's probably one of the best vacations I've ever had.
That sounds amazing. I had a friend who honeymooned in Costa Rica. They took their honeymoon. It was right after 9/11. So they were on one of the first flights that when they resumed flights out of the United States. And so nobody was there. And so they pretty much had the beach and the resort to themselves.
Yeah, wonderful.
And they said it was just gorgeous. And again, the people in Costa Rica were so wonderful and nice and friendly. And they just could not speak highly enough of it. I've had several people that said Costa Rica is on my list. I definitely want to.
It is. It's very beautiful. I would totally think about like buying a second home there if I ever had the money to do that.
Okay.
They're very hospitable to people, to Americans coming there, spending their money. You don't have to pay taxes when you go there to buy a house.
Always a plus.
Which I told them I thought was crazy. I said, you really should probably rethink that because that could be a lot of money.
You need some revenue.
That'd be some good revenue for your country. But yeah, no, that was just wonderful. I didn't like, the only downside was their roads. I didn't particularly want to drive there. But again,
tell them taxes can help with that.
Taxes can help with the roads.
Oh, that's great. Now, there's so many places I want to go. I have my youngest niece is living in Japan. And so I definitely want to go see her. My oldest niece was living in Japan, and we went like right when COVID was starting. And so they had already shut a few things down. We didn't get to see everything, but Japan was so friendly, wonderful, historic, like this really rich history.
Oh yeah.
Beautiful.
My daughter's going there in May.
She's going to have the best time.
She's in her 4th year of Japanese.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
Yes, I will say it was extremely helpful. All of my nieces are fluent in Japanese, and so it was very nice having a translator with us. Extremely beneficial. But even without, like, I remember there was one day I was in the train station And my husband and my niece had gone off to do something, and I was thinking about what I wanted to eat. Well, apparently I was really deep into that thought because this man came up to me and he said, "Do you need help? Do you need to help know where you're going? Can I help you find a train?" And I was like, "Oh, that is so sweet. I'm really thinking about soup, but I really appreciate that."
He could probably point you in the right direction.
Right?
Yeah, I've heard the food is really, really good and not very expensive. My daughter actually told me yesterday that she's a research person. She goes to UF and she's looking to go into research, and she's been researching this trip forever. And she said, "Yeah, Mom, it's like if you go to Texas Roadhouse, a meal like that is like $10 in US dollars because the conversion right now to yen,
the yen is doing
like,
so poorly. So yes,
doing so poorly." She's like, "Mom, I really think I'm going to be able to do really well while I'm there."
I tell you, we ate very affordably. We ate a lot of different foods, some that were surprising to me. So, for instance, I did not realize that Japanese people very much culturally, like you go on a trip, you come home, you bring sweets.
Yes.
There was desserts, and they were so good.
Yes.
We went in March with the cherry blossoms. So they have sakura, which is the cherry blossom flavor. So it's not cherry, it's the cherry blossom. The soup that I was thinking about that day in the train station, the soup I had, it's some of the best soup I have ever had. I'm trying to figure out how I can get that flavor here in the States. Extremely affordable, lots to do and see. Truthfully, a lot of the things that we wound up doing that I thought were fantastic were free.
Yes.
There's just, like I said, it's this rich history. Get a it's a JTA, I think it is, JRA pass.
Yeah.
The train pass. And you can travel, and that's train and some of the subways.
So I'm sure they'll have all of that laid out for her.
Yeah.
So it's a part of the package, I guess, and part of, her tuition is paying for, it's like a class.
Oh, nice.
So I think we have to pay for the plane ticket and we have to pay for the food. I think she gets breakfast, so we have to pay for lunch and dinner and then whatever she spends.
You can do that pretty affordably, though.
Yeah.
And she will have a great time.
And
take lots of pictures.
I want her to travel as much as possible.
Absolutely.
It opens up her mind to all of the diversity and all of the different cultures, and she's very open already. But I think as the more you travel, the more accepting you are.
I agree. And you also see there are different people who do things a different way.
Yeah.
Right?
And everything different.
Everything's different. And so
they might sit on the floor and eat.
Right.
And that's totally normal.
Right.
They might, eat with their hands.
Right.
They might eat, it's just the simplest things.
The simplest things, but to really have an appreciation for them. My niece, now she's back in the States, and she still has inside and outside shoes. And by each door, she's got a place for shoes, because you're going to switch shoes when you're inside and outside. It's like, it makes a lot of sense. So, different things that you can pick up from different cultures. I think it's a great opportunity. If you have it, you should take it. All right. So that was the fun stuff. So let's get into something that is a little less fun. And that is how to address DEI at work when it's unpopular. So we are in Florida. We know there's been legislation trying to limit how DEI is talked about at work. There are lots of organizations to not run afoul of the law have just said, hey, I'm not doing it at all. We're just going to stay away from it. And even though that if it's done right, it really helps engage employees and gets you diversity of talent in the room and at the table.
There's research that proves it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, right?
Tons of it.
Tons of research that DEI will increase your productivity and it will increase your profitability. Yes. And you should be structuring your programs to do so. But there's still resistance. So, and I know you had a personal experience with that as well. So let's do, even from your personal experience, if you don't mind sharing, like what happened And what was the environment like, and how did you respond?
So I've had lots of experiences, and I think I came into it very naively, honestly. One of the first experiences that I had was getting in the car to go to lunch with a group of people, right? And somebody said, I was talking about how beautiful the neighborhood is because I really appreciate architecture. And this was over in the Riverside area, but it was in the older Riverside area. And we're in the car and we're going to go get something to eat. And someone says, yeah, but it's really dark over here. And I said, I'm like looking outside and I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, it's a beautiful day. What are you talking about? Right? Because I was just naive because I would have never thought it to mean anything else but that.
Right.
And then when it clicked in my head what they were talking about, I was like, you know what? I'm going to just continue going with this so they can realize how stupid what they're saying really is. And I was probably the highest rank in the car. So I continued with it. And I was like, yeah, it's just such a gorgeous day. And I was like, and there's not a lot of trees over here. And I was like, I just don't think it stays that dark over here during the day. And everybody in the car was totally quiet. And I think at that point they realized what they were saying was totally inappropriate. And so that's how I played that off. Looking back, maybe I should have been a little bit more upfront and said, listen, that's not okay. So I want to lead in with that because that was really like my first in my face experience, right? There's been other experiences where I've been at a job where, we're trying to drive DEI in the company. And, at the top, everyone's screaming, let's push DEI, let's do DEI. And you're talking, there's a lot of parts in a company where it could be for vendor's sake, customer's sake, employees' sake, right? And a lot of times you really want to be pushing it on all fronts. And right now, you got a lot of customers that are saying, we won't do business with you if you're not doing DEI with suppliers.
Right.
So you have to really push doing that. And I think some companies are doing a good job at that. Some aren't. It's hard because the DEI suppliers are a lot of times not funded as well. So they can't take on the bigger jobs. They can't they can't take on the insurance that's required by a company that's a really large company. A larger company may require, these really high limits, and you have a DEI company that may be a smaller company that can't. And so that's going to cause for the company to maybe be flexible with those limits if they truly want to be DEI.
Right.
So it's when that happens, I think, that you find out whether or not that company is truly committed to the DEI or are they just talking about DEI. When you're talking about the employees, I think the beginning is usually, I think people typically start, it's almost like politicians, right? They start with the right intention, right? You walk around and you look and it's all predominantly white and you're like, okay, we really need to do something here. And you either get someone like me or you get a group of people that are like me that are like, we'll be more successful if we're more culturally diverse. And you begin to hire people who are culturally diverse. And then the very next, it's like the next shoe that drops is you begin to have people in your office going, I really feel isolated here. I really feel like I don't have anyone, because there's just not a lot of other people here like me. I don't feel like I'm getting the right support here. I don't feel like and so if you're in a high position like I was and you go and you take it to the people that can make those decisions, because I don't have the authority to make those decisions. And they kind of look at you and they blow you off and say, we really do have the support for those things. And you're like, no, we don't. I'm really trying to tell you that we need to do something about this.
Right.
And they're like, but we don't really have a problem here. Like, they need to just kind of suck it up and blend. Does that make, you know?
Right.
And I'm like, but they can't just blend.
Right.
Like, that's not the answer. That is not the answer. And the answer is also not that we choose those few people that we've hired and we throw them on all of our marketing material and we prance them around during the dog and pony shows, because guess what? The next drop from that is that they end up in your office going, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
And then next, what happens is they end up leaving. And they're incredible assets. These people were hired because, I mean, and I am going to toot my horn. I'm really good at hiring people. And I hire people because I know that they're really incredible, awesome assets. And so to lose someone that I hired is a huge loss for any company, because I've hired someone that's aligned with our values, aligned with our mission, aligned with everything, everything. And I know that they're going to be an incredible add to make our company better.
Right.
So we invest a lot. No matter what company, you're going to invest money in training. You're going to invest money in just folding them into your organization. And let's just say they stay a year. So you've invested a whole year into this person, and it's going to take about a year for them to start to see through the curtain, right? And then they're going to be like, okay, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go somewhere that's really, truly committed to my success, because they're going to look at the upward and, the upward echelon of people. And if all the upper echelon of people are all white, even if they're some couple of white female or whatever, but there's no one of color, no Asian, no, Jewish, obviously there's a multitude of ways that you can be diverse.
Right.
They're going to say, I'm never going to get there.
Right.
And they're not even making like a path for me to get there. Then they're going to go somewhere else where there actually is an opportunity for them to get there.
Well, and I think you brought up a couple of really important points, right? I want to jump back to the supplier, because I had that. We were working, when I was at the bank, we were trying to contract with minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses. Those were the two groups that we were really trying to improve as far as our diversification. And so we ran into those same issues, right? They're not big enough. They don't have enough insurance. They can't deliver, et cetera, et cetera. And so I said, well, if we're going to do this, we have to rethink how we work with suppliers. Yes. Right? So for instance, I was like, we have catering contracts, right? And we have one catering contract, as opposed to, well, do we have somebody who brings in the meals? Could we have another catering contract for the desserts? Right. And that was a small one, but wound up being a really big and important one, because the smaller organization, and that was a Black-owned company, they could handle a dessert order for 1,000 people for an event that we were having, where they couldn't do that for the meals and desserts. So, can we break some of the supply things apart? Can we look for ways that we can pair smaller suppliers with larger suppliers and having them work together? If you're committed to do it, you'll find the reasons. If you aren't committed to do it, you'll look for the ways out.
Well, and if you just ask, because a lot of times in some of the companies that I've worked with, if we would ask a vendor and the vendor would be like, yeah, I would be happy to help with that woman-owned company to, help give them better pricing so that they can be more competitive. Right. And sometimes that's all they need, is they need that foot in the door. And are we going to, would you do business with them every single time? No. But, it might be a company that's doing $1 million a year while the company you're working for is doing, $200 million a year.
Right.
But that $1 million a year, if they move to $2 million a year, you
That's
just
huge.
doubled you just doubled their revenue.
Right.
And that means a lot.
Right.
It might not mean a lot to your company because, it's $1 million.
Right.
So,
Right.
And you might have, who knows what, say you have $100 million in costs.
Right.
But I think you make a really good point. If you care enough, you can do small things and find people that are really, really good. And I don't think that to choose diverse suppliers means that you have to deliberately go choose every diverse supplier that shows up at your door.
No.
Because they might not be right for your company.
No, they need to be right for your company. They need to be high quality,
meet all those values that
Absolutely.
every other one. And the price point has to be right.
Right.
Because that was always an issue at every company every company I work for, everybody wants to make money, right? And so
I want to meet the company that doesn't want to make money.
Yeah, me too.
Right?
Even in the nonprofit world,
you still got to make money.
You still got to make money to a certain point.
That's every development professional fundraising. You got to make money.
You got to make money. So, but maybe you find, maybe you figure out a way that company can make a margin that is comfortable by doing something else, like whether again partnering with another vendor or provider, or using connecting them with another supplier, or I don't know. There's always creative ways. You just really have to take the time. I do believe that the only way you do it is to dedicate a person, like a chief of that is really, truly passionate about it and really, truly, like that's their only job. Because it's hard. It's not easy. But they have to have accountability,
right?
Goals, and they have to have the authority to make decisions. And they have to have authority to, at some point, be able to change the culture that currently exists and hold people accountable when they don't abide by the new kind of the new wave of culture that you're trying to make.
So let's jump into that, because I think that's really important, and that is the people side of this, right? Number one, I think it is hard, if not impossible, to effectively do DEI initiatives in an organization that are really going to improve profitability and productivity if that's not coming from the top.
Yep, it has to come from
the top. It
has
to come from the top. So if you've got resistance, I think you have to start with the head honchos first. Right. Because if they're not on board, that's going to be a challenge.
Right.
I remember in a previous job, it was male dominated. It was men at the top, nothing but men. And there were reasons, there were excuses. We just don't have any women to do this. Okay, well then we need to do some things to get women ready to be in this room. They had one woman on the team who was in a position that everybody knew really didn't have any authority, but she was on the team so that they could have a woman on the team, right? And so tokenism is not effective either. And then the conversation became, okay, well then how do we need to groom women to get them ready to be here? Because if we're saying that we don't have folks here, then either A, we're not casting the wide enough net when we're recruiting. Well, I will agree. Most of the people who were here were homegrown, right? Well, then why do we not have women who are also growing into those positions to be ready for this? So we have to really start at the top in addressing that. But we oftentimes get met with resistance, right? So, and I think addressing the resistance is also extremely important. And so I'm curious, because, there's lots of reasons why people will resist DEI initiatives. What were some of the reasons that you ran into? Because I know you said, for instance, it's not really a problem, right? It's not an issue. And so sometimes it's like saying that if we say that we're going to do DEI, then that means we have an issue, and we don't have an issue. So no.
I think that some people's perception, you can't, I think people can change when it comes to this particular issue, right? I do believe that the top has to make the example. And, I will say Henry Brown did a very good job at Miller. He went to the United Way, the civil rights movement, the thing last year. And we were the sponsor. And we had 3 tables. We were up front. I do believe we were the whitest group there. And I was really proud to be there because I loved the fact that we were there. And Henry, spoke there, and I think he's made a really great example because he is the very top. But, even seeing the top person there, I don't think that it is going to change fully the perception of someone who's been raised in an environment where they were taught something their entire life. And then all of a sudden they start hearing about DEI, and they're supposed to see something in a certain way that they've never seen it before. I think that is almost like a one-on-one kind of training, or like the not unseen bias, but the
implicit bias.
Yeah. So we all took a lot of those tests, right? I apparently am an ageist. And now that I look at myself, I can honestly tell you, yeah, I am definitely an ageist, and I'm working on it, right? But it took me taking that test
to realize that was a bias. To
realize that was my bias. And so I definitely, I think doing things like that, I think that really helps.
Yes.
Because, there's so many people who are like, I'm not a racist. I'm not a sexist. I'm not a bigot. I'm not a whatever, right? And actually I took those tests and I'm not, right? But I am an ageist. And I'm like,
well, and
I can totally see that.
And we all have biases.
We all have biases.
We all have them,
correct,
right? And so, and it's so funny. I have a friend who does implicit bias training, and he always starts off with sports teams, and people will readily recognize a bias that they have. So for instance, and I know this is one of those things that I shouldn't say in the state of Florida, but I went to the University of Tennessee, right? Gators. Oh, no,
yeah,
not
my
University
daughter
of
goes.
Florida,
That's
right?
where all my money goes,
right?
So.
Well, and so then same thing. Like we said, volunteered. Like but it's fun in sports teams. We were very clear to recognize that, and I'm not even a football fan.
Yeah,
right?
I'm not either.
but I still recognize the people we play. For instance, I'm huge into women's basketball. I do not like UConn. I will not like UConn. It will never happen. So, but
right.
we're comfortable admitting that. It's the same in all of these other areas. And so we all have those biases. We have to deal with those. I mean, I think addressing it in terms of bias as opposed to addressing it in terms of isms generally is one of those ways that helps make that conversation a little better, because we do all have
like that. I can remember, and I still catch myself doing it. And when I do it, I'm like, stop. I'd be like, I don't know if I want to hire someone that's like under the age of 25 because they might not have the maturity. They might not have the, and then on the flip side, I don't know if I want to hire somebody that's, 60 years old and they're going to retire in 5 years and then we're going to have to hire somebody else again. And then I'm like, man, that is so awful. Like, why would I be that way? Like, I would have never thought. But when I started like reflecting on myself, I'm like, yeah, you're an ageist. You are totally an ageist.
Right. But being aware.
But now I'm aware of it.
And helps you make better decisions.
And so now I'm like, don't do that. Don't do that. Like, stop.
Right.
Stop.
Right.
It's still there.
Absolutely.
I can feel that it's there, but I know that it's wrong now.
But
like,
you can, but now that you've
it.
brought it to the forefront, you're aware of it, you can actually do corrective actions.
And
to
so
address
that,
it.
I think, is probably the best. Like, I think if someone's let's just say someone's hiring someone into the executive suite, I think there is a couple of things that they should do before they bring someone into an executive suite. Emotional intelligence. I think they have to have that kind of training. I think they need to have DEI training. And I think they also need to do things like communication skills to make sure that they're going to be able to communicate properly, because they need to communicate in a different way than they probably communicated this way. There's an executive type of communication that they need to have. And, they may be out communicating with a whole, they may be communicating with the news. They may be communicating with, government. They may be communicating with the city. They may be communicating with, Shad Khan or whatever. They could be communicating on the news or whatever. So I think that it's really important. And I also think that every executive needs a leadership coach, because that leadership coach can keep you in line.
Right.
And say, hey, maybe you're not aware that you are,
doing these things.
Right. And also knowing your personality type. Just so you've got blind spots.
Right.
You've got, and how you may be coming across to somebody. I have the tendency to want to jump in and fix things. And so sometimes I would jump in and want to fix something. Well, that's telling you that you don't know how to do it. Right? When really my instinct is to help you.
Right.
And I'm trying to help. But you're going, what in the world is this girl doing? I know what I'm doing.
Right.
Right?
Just doing it differently.
So my leadership coach said, ask. Would you like my help with that? Like, this happens to be something I'm, pretty good at. And you may say yes and you may say no.
Right.
But at least ask.
Right.
Don't just jump in and do it.
Right. And that comes down to really knowing yourself well as understanding how other people work that may be different from you. And I think that's hugely important.
And I think all of those things help with having a diverse group of people, right? Because if you're now sitting at a table that is women, men, Black, white, Asian, Jewish, whatever, you better make sure that everybody understands how to communicate and to communicate in a way that is sensitive to everyone in that room.
Right.
Not,
and you have to, number one, communication, just like marriages, number one issue, right? And so you really do have to check on communication. But I think you also have to have means and a culture so that if there is a misstep, if there is an offense, that can be addressed and dealt with and moved past quickly and harmoniously, right? I can't feel like I can't say anything.
Right.
And it can't be a situation that if I do, there's repercussions. So you have to, that also has to be part of the culture, right? That accountability and the ability to sort of check each other so that we're improving collectively and moving forward. But before you get to the diverse group of people being at the table, right? The people who are resistant, the people who have XYZ belief, I think in addition to those trainings that you talked about, because I think those trainings are important, I think you also have to have data.
Yes.
Because you might have all these biases, you may have all these prejudices, you may think that the team is just fine the way it is. But if I show you what this group that we're like, and that they put in these initiatives, and now their profit margin has risen by 42%.
Absolutely.
That's a different conversation. And again, it shouldn't be just the feel-good, fuzzy stuff of DEI. This is a business decision because it is the best for our business.
Right.
And I think that will be a lot more effective in having some of those conversations true as well.
Right. And I think that when we're talking about DEI, I mean, we're those tough conversations too about equal pay and having a third party come in and just make sure that, you know, I don't mean somebody inside the company doing it.
Right.
Not even your HR.
Right.
I mean a third party coming in and making sure that you have equal pay based on job duties, based on titles, based on whatever.
Oh, sure.
And do that, you know, every couple of years. And make sure that things haven't gotten out of whack.
Well, and I think that when people hear...
think that's just be the way you do business.
Yes. Well, people hear DEI, right? And it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. People hear it and then they think race. And they think, I'm going to be called a racist in a training lots of times, right? But it's so many more things than that. So, for instance, is your website designed for people who have visual impairments? Or if you have hearing impairments and you've got sound connected, do you have, you know, alt text or the ability to have translation services? It's so many things, right? It may be accessibility in the building.
Accessibility in the building,
right?
Correct.
It may be, do you have pathways for women and people of color to get into leadership? Do you have support networks? Do you
have a breastfeeding station?
Yeah, a breastfeeding station, right? do you provide same-sex benefits for couples? All these things are in diversity, equity, inclusion. It is a big, broad
That's why I say
bucket.
One person, a chief of DEI, whatever you want to call it. And a lot of people, a lot of larger companies in Jacksonville have, I think the Floyd incident did make a lot of companies, as bad as the incident was, as horrible and tragic as that incident was, I do believe his life was not taken in vain, because I do believe it did push a lot of change. Some people, I think, did it as show. I do believe there probably was a lot of companies that did it in show. But then I also think that there were a lot of companies that truly changed their entire organization because it was such a wake-up call.
Yes.
And I think that if you have truly a person dedicated to doing, you know, all those things, because you're right, I think sometimes people get really hung up in thinking that DEI is just about black and white. And it's not just about black and white.
Correct.
I had a young man that worked for me, and he had almost total hearing loss. And, you know, and he would come to me and ask for, like, the strangest things, the things that you would never think about. Because we would have, like, what would you call them? Like the meetings where the CEO would talk, you know, for quarterly meetings. And he would ask me, he would said, can you ask them to please put the commentary up in words so that I can read it? Well, we had never done that before. And we actually had several people thank us, people who were not deaf, but like really hard of hearing, who could not hear it either where they were, or, you know, they were in an office where, you know, they had to listen on the phone or whatever. And it really helped a lot of other people. And if it wasn't their first language, English wasn't their first language, maybe they could read it. I mean, I know when I learned a new language, I could read it a lot better.
I can read it a lot better than I can hear it, understand it.
Hearing it, you know. And actually, if you're reading it, you can change it to your language on your screen.
Right.
Which I didn't know that. So you're right. You're absolutely correct in that it's just so much more. But I think people just kind of hone into it immediately. But I also think those are the people with the biases too.
Well, and again, so this is where you're going to have to do a really good check system. But I'll say it, and I will say it until the cows come home. If you don't start at the top, it's not going to be successful. You're not going to be able to integrate it into all of the lines of business that you need to. You're not going to really be able to address it so that it's not a chore, but people also see the benefit from it. Because that's the other thing, the resistance comes when people do not see the benefit. This just seems like another thing that has taken up my time.
Right.
But if I see it, and we're doing more and we're getting more communities and we've got more people and we've got a lot more energy and we're actually having fun and people are really free to be themselves at work, and I get to be that, which includes me. When it gets to that point, then people embrace it because it really is doing the things that you want it to do in your organization.
I've literally had an employee walk into my office, close the door, and talk to me. Mm-hmm. It was a manager of mine, and he said, I am so glad that you hired X because before you hired him, I'd never really had long interactions like work or school or anything else with a black man. Mm-hmm. And we have become really good friends. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it touched my heart so much because I was like, one of what you said to me makes me really sad. Mm-hmm. I said, but because he just grew up in an area that was totally white, out in the country. He went to school out there. He went to church out there. I mean, this guy's not even been out of the state of Florida. Mm-hmm. So it's just how he was brought up, right? Mm-hmm. And then he worked in an environment that was predominantly white. And then as we started to, get more culture into an organization, he was like, it's just opened my eyes up to so much. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I absolutely love him. Mm-hmm. And he's like, and we've become such good friends. We go play ping pong together. We have, and that is what it's all about. Mm-hmm. It's like just putting people into situations where they can work together, play together, get to know each other, go to lunch together, break bread together. You want those relationships because those relationships in the organization are going to, again, make people more productive. They're going to make them more likely to stay, and which all turns into more productivity and profitability for the organization, which is great. All right. So I know we've been talking quite a bit. We've talked about a lot of things. If you were thinking about the one big takeaway, for all the things that we discussed, what would you say is the most important thing for people who are thinking about these challenges of addressing DEI? How do you do it when, it's not popular or there's resistance? What would you say is the one big takeaway from our conversation today? I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that it's got to come from the top down. Mm-hmm. I think the person at the very, very top has got to be like, this is what we're going to do. This is very, very important. I think that your organization needs to mirror the society of which it lives. It is in, right? Mm-hmm. Jacksonville is a very diverse city. Very diverse. And I think that you have to put the effort in to make it be that way. Mm-hmm. I think one of the first steps that top person can do is to put someone at a C-level in charge of that with the authority to make the decisions that they're going to have to make. Mm-hmm. And one of the first things that they need to do as they begin to hire people is to start to show results in data and share that data with people and be like, look at what's happening. Isn't this cool? Like, this is really cool, and get people excited about it. Because as you get excited about it and you share it with everyone, that's when people start to buy in, and explain to them why you're doing it before you ever do it. And say, as we start to share, as this starts to happen, because we know it will, right? We're going to share with you the information, and I don't know if you do it, department by department or however you decide to do it, but, sharing that information amongst everyone, I think will definitely cause buy-in with the rest of the company. The supplier edge is a little bit more complicated, But I think if you're willing to be creative in the way you look at it, and work with those suppliers, I think that you can make that work. It does take time. I have been in charge of that edge of it, and it's difficult. Certifications expire, and it's just, I had to actually get someone to help me handle that, just the certifications piece alone. But I think that you can get people excited about it. And when you get people working together, and I think it really doesn't take that long for people to start to really like enjoy the fact that they're working with people that maybe they've never worked with before.
Yeah.
And that's when you get to really sit back and just watch it kind of blossom and grow.
Yeah. And I think that, you do have to make some decisions with the organization in mind, right? I think about my team and who's going to be a good fit on this team. Even as I'm trying to diversify the team, so I'm bringing someone new, I want to make sure that they fit, because I also want them to have a sense of belonging. I want this to be a good match. I want them to stay, even if they're toward the beginning of this diversification. And I don't have other people who are like them yet. But if I've got a good match, we're actively talking about, we're actively creating that space, and we're working toward that, I'm more likely to be able to get them to stay on. So I think that's also really important.
And then I think training, I think just like HR does, sexual harassment training and, all that stuff that when you onboard people, I think that taking your organization and making sure that they have, what is it called?
Implicit bias.
I can't ever remember that. Implicit bias training and, a good DEI training. I think that really just kind of opens your eyes to yourself. And then doing that for all your onboarding moving forward. I think that would help just with a good foundation.
Yes.
It's a lot of work. But I think that it's work that really pays off.
It does. It has a tremendous payoff.
Yeah.
And shameless plug, 904 Forward does provide implicit bias and DEI training. So contact us if you're interested in and of need. But the payoff is huge. And I think that is the piece that, you have to focus on. It does take some work initially.
Yes.
But you can get it to be this thing that gets people excited, that they are engaged. Matter of fact, they're more engaged because of it. Because really, DEI is about creating a better work environment for everyone.
A better culture.
A better culture. And one that is going to give you the results that you really want. So
right.
That's great. All right. Well, Rochelle, this has been fantastic.
Yes.
This has been such a great conversation. Thank you for joining us in the conference room today.
Thank you very much. It's been a delight.
Thanks. And thank you for joining us. We always want to hear from you. So if you have questions, comments, situations you'd like for us to address, please feel free to email us at info@904word.org. Click that like button. Let us be liked. We like to be liked, as well as subscribe so you can be sure to get notifications of all the content that we're putting out. We want to make sure that we're producing the things that you want to hear more about. So we thank you for joining us this week in the conference room, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.